Okay, you guys, today I'm going to be doing a special rant about creationism. Now, today on YouTube, I encountered the, it was the first time I ever encountered an creationist, an anti-evolutionist, basically, and I've never met anybody like that before. It was a completely strange experience, and it was kind of exciting actually, because see here, I have my copy of Richard Dawkins' The Greatest Show on Earth, and it is about the evidence for evolution. And I'm about halfway through it right now, and it is an excellent book, and it has convinced me that evolution is real and true. And, well, I already knew that, evolution is true, and that its properties are very real. And so, you see, this evolutionist believed that there wasn't any evidence for evolution, and of course there is lots of evidence in this book right here. And now, I'm not going to tell you to just go out and get the book, because what would be the purpose of this? But you see, this book, it contains a lot of things. It defines a theory, because most people think, they say it's only a theory, but that's because people are just accustomed to thinking of a theory as just a hypothesis. But scientifically, a theory is something that explains a principle, a well-known principle, fact. And in science, if you call something a theory, then that means that it has evidence, it is based on well-established facts, and that its principles are valid and are seen, are evident. And so that's what a theory is. So in the scientific community, evolution is already accepted as a fact. Now, you can say that there are lots of times when people have been mistaken, such as when people thought the Earth was flat, and when people thought that the sun was no, the Earth was the center of the universe, and then we got who is that guy? The guy who sailed around the Earth. Magellan. That's it. Okay, so there's Magellan who sailed around the Earth, and there was Galileo who studied the stars and concluded that the Earth was not the center of the universe. The sun is the center of the universe. So there are scientific advancements like that, and see, people used to think that the Earth was only as old as history can remember, but we have been proven otherwise by fossil records, by looking at the distance stars are, and concluding that by their distance, by the star's distance, if the stars are that far away, then we would not be able to see them if the Earth were only about 10,000 years old, because they are, let's say, millions of light years away. And if they're millions of light years away, then that means it would take millions of years for their light to get there, so they must have been there millions of years ago. So you can see that the universe is already that old. And so you have evidence of evolution, such as the domestication of cabbage. If you looked at a wild cabbage, it looks like a flower. But when you see domesticated cabbages, and you'll notice that it's like a big ball of leaves, and it's been bred that way by humans, in a sort of what do you call it? Artificial selection is what it's called, and it's the same thing that has happened with dogs, because dogs have been artificially selected by both humans and themselves for their own survival to from wolves. They've become dogs. They have become domesticated by people so that the dogs can survive, and so that the humans, can live with the dogs. I don't really know. I guess they're good for, like, hunting, maybe. Who knows what they were good for back then? But see, we have artificially bred different kinds of dogs, like the pugs, which have very short snouts. You can see the more wolf-like dogs have longer snouts, but the dogs that have been artificially selected by humans have shorter snouts, and they wouldn't even be able to exist in the wild, because pugs are unable to give birth by anything but cesarean section. So we can see that in what? Yeah. So you can see that in dogs. Dogs have been selectively bred by humans. So and there's also artificial selection by bees and birds, hummingbirds particularly, who feed on the nectar of flowers. You see, what happens is a flower, when it has pollen inside, has pollen, which it uses the pollen to reproduce, and it uses the nectar to feed the bees, so that when the bees are lured in by the nectar, that's their lure, their reward for taking the pollen on their legs. The bees will come down to the flowers, and the bees will choose flowers that are brighter, that have more nectar. So flowers are evolved to be brighter and have more nectar because those attract bees, and the bees get their pollen on their legs, and then they go out and reproduce and have more flowers of that kind. So you can see that, so the brighter flowers would attract bees, and brighter red flowers, which attract hummingbirds, because hummingbirds see in red, are selectively bred by hummingbirds, because the hummingbirds will take the pollen from one flower that they see as red, they will go to the next flower, and they will pollinate it, which helps it reproduce. And so the flowers that are redder reproduce more. So these flowers are designed for hummingbirds, by hummingbirds actually. So you can see that artificial selection can be done by both humans and animals. Now, as for natural selection, that's more of an issue of survival of the fittest. And you know principle. Most people don't really understand the principle. It's that when an animal is weaker, it will be more susceptible to predators, and so the weaker animals with weaker genes will die off, and so the animals with the stronger genes that live, well, the genes aren't actually strong themselves. The genes have the genes carry traits, and the better traits, the traits that will help the animal survive longer, because those animals that do survive with the genes will be more likely to reproduce. And so that's how animals evolve. That's how creatures actually evolve to become more to adapt more to their environment. And you see, that's humans have been select. Well, maybe I shouldn't get into that yet. Anyway, so speciation is another thing. People think that speciation isn't possible because they don't understand how it works. Now, it's a bit more complicated than natural selection, because natural selection only explains how things advance, but not how they differentiate. Now, animals will differentiate when something strange happens, like some strange event that will separate two different two families of the same type of animals, so that they will have separate gene pools, but they will be from the same descendant. And so when you have a barrier between them, such as water, they will develop into their own communities, their own sort of gene pool, and they will become different over time if their environments are different, which typically happens when they are in separate places.